Hi all, welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. Today, Yassine Regragui is joining me. Welcome, Yassine.
Thank you, Oriol.
It's actually a pleasure to have you today. And well, for all those of you who might not know Yassine yet, I'm going to let you know his biography briefly. Yassine is an expert on FinTech in China. So basically, he's a FinTech and China specialist with over 10-year international working experience, including 6 years in China. Yassine started his career in Shanghai, where he actually was the first non-Chinese employee to join the Alipay team there in China. Then he launched and led the multilingual version of the Alipay app. After a 3-year stint at Deloitte in Paris as a FinTech and China expert, he's currently in charge of the marketing strategy at Worldline Global. He has assisted banks, companies, universities, and governments in the launch and development of FinTech activities in Europe, Africa, and Asia. Yassine was also featured as one of the top FinTech voices in the world. Actually, he was cited as one of the 100 most influential FinTech voices by Onalytica in 2021. And he's been featured in more than 200 international media in 15 countries. And in a more personal note, Yassine is also teaching a very interesting course on FinTech in China at CFT in London, which is an organization where I also teach a course on central bank digital currencies. So once again, welcome Yassine to my podcast.
Thank you, Oriol, for having me. It's a pleasure.
The pleasure is mine. And well, now let's proceed with our discussion and let's start with your personal journey, your background. Looking at your biography, which I just summarized a few seconds ago, we see that you have a very relevant experience in China, having worked for companies like Alibaba and Pay, very big companies in the Chinese big tech scene. So could you please tell us a bit more about your personal journey? Like, for example, how did you evolve from starting your career in Shanghai as an entrepreneur to launching and leading, among others, Alipay's multilingual app for non-Chinese users? How was that process, that evolution?
Sure. Very interesting question, especially to start speaking about China. So I arrived in China in 2012. I worked for a Chinese startup specialized in marketing and PR. So it helped me to create connections directly with this professional business environment in Shanghai, and led me to meet other people that are working in the crowdfunding sphere in Shanghai. So this was, let's say, my two first experiences in startups. Then I had the occasion to launch my own e-commerce platform, again in Shanghai. And 2014, I decided to join Alibaba in Hangzhou. So I worked for Alibaba and Group in total for 3 years and a half. But first, I worked at AliExpress, where I was mainly in charge of digital marketing. And then I switched to Alipay, as you mentioned, as the first non-Chinese employee to join the team in China to launch and lead the English and the traditional Chinese version of Alipay app that before only had the simplified Chinese. So it was, let's say, a long 6 years journey that I really liked and helped me to grow. And I would love to tell more about it if needed.
Thank you for sharing. And do you think that from the moment that you arrived in China until the moment that you left, the business environment changed much there in China? Do you think could you see personally many changes in the business environment in general?
So I can maybe speak first about the evolution when I was in China. So before speaking about
sure.
Because when I arrived in China, it was let's say just the beginning of WeChat and WeChat Pay. Alipay did not have its own app, and it has evolved from a payment and escrow service to let's say digital platform. We call it a SuperApp. So the progression was really rapid. So in 6 years, I saw several changes. The app, let's say, WeChat went from 0 to 1 billion users. Same with Alipay. So yeah, I could see this evolution from the heart. And then when I left China and working from France, but still having a close eye on what's happening in China, we still see this evolution of innovations, of let's say same energy of innovation and creativity, etc. But there were more regulations. So when let's say China allowed these innovations, etc., they let it like with a white card, but then later on they had to regulate it, which is a bit normal, especially as those companies are becoming bigger, and that the regulator need to leave more space for newcomers. That's why we see other payment solutions, fintech solutions entering the Chinese market that so far were mainly handled by Alibaba and Tencent, but later on we could see like Jingdong, we could see ByteDance, we could see Baidu, we could see several other big players that also play a role in the fintech ecosystem.
Nice. So, well, I mean, someone like you who worked for Alibaba and Pay is in a perfect position to tell our listeners a bit more about the area of TechFin. No? I mean, first of all, I would like you, if you could please let us know what's the difference or the main difference between TechFin and FinTech, and how these big companies are, well, turning the FinTech landscape upside down in China. But also, aside from that, you mentioned this idea of regulations. You said that there were no regulations or very few a few years ago, but this has changed. So we've all heard about these new regulations labeled by some as crackdowns, but not necessarily crackdowns, but still, I mean, many new regulations coming up in China. So do you think that these recent regulatory efforts in China will affect the industry like in a negative way, or will it make it actually stronger?
Sure. I think in your question there are three questions, but
yes.
The first one,
what is TechFin? It's more than one, yes.
What is TechFin? Actually, TechFin is maybe a word that was pronounced the first time by Jack Ma, one of the founders of Alibaba Group. Actually, it's as simple as this. So it's a technology company, technology company that offers financial services, while FinTech is by essence, it's a financial company that uses technology to offer its services. And it started with the Ant Group, because Ant Group is more than ever a technology company. More than 68% of the staff are engineers, tech engineers, which also proves that we also talk about TechFin, and it relies a lot on technology to offer its services. So in China, we never talk about FinTech, and really the buzzword there is really TechFin, and now it's becoming global because we also see the GAFAM in the US that also offer financial services, and this word become also global. But we still see some FinTech companies in China, although they are not as big as those TechFin, but it's good to see this, let's say, separation of two models, because they are really different. One relies on technology, one relies on financial solutions. So banks, for instance, can naturally acquire FinTech companies, but will barely acquire TechFin companies because they are really big, etc., although they rely on their technologies, etc. Also on their business model, if you see the example of Ant Group, they have such like cloud computing technologies, they have AI, they have blockchain, they have all this machine learning, etc. So all these are technologies, and thanks to the platforms they create, they connect several, let's say, financial services to enable the users with front-end platforms. So this, as said, your second question was about the
regulations, because when you were talking before, you made reference to this idea, to the idea of not having like many regulations a few years ago, but now China having changed his approach. I mean, that's actually very true, because we all, well, heard what happened with last year with the anti-IPO, and we know that China is now like changing its approach to TechFin. I mean, not by establishing crackdowns, as some people say, but I think more about trying to regulate more this area. So I wanted to hear from you on whether you think that these new regulations will actually like affect this area like in a negative way, or actually will make it stronger.
Of course. So actually, the way they probably announced these regulations were a bit surprising and sudden. That's why it was like a buzz around the world, associating Ant's IPO suspension with the regulations. But the regulations always existed. It's just that now with the suspension of Ant Group's IPO, they announced some new regulations regarding the microloans, regarding the data, regarding the antitrust, etc. And it was, let's say, prepared for a long time. So these ones were, in my mind, positive on the long term. Of course, on the short term, it will, let's say, force these TechFin companies to adapt, especially those who rely a lot on the, let's say, on microloans, because we know that microloans took a big part of the revenue of Ant Group. But it leaves more space for banks, also for newcomers like fintech companies. It leaves room for, let's say, innovators and entrepreneurs who want to launch new services. And before, they were facing the competition of giants and dinosaurs, such as Alibaba and Tencent. But later on, they have more room to grow. And it especially leaves room for banks to develop their services, because why we should understand why these companies developed rapidly, why Alibaba, why Tencent developed rapidly, because they could fill a gap of innovation that was offered by banks. Banks were not innovating enough. Same thing what's happened also in the West with the rise of fintech. But in China, it was different, because we saw like high mobile penetration. We saw like the needs of Chinese people to use fast payments, to ask for a loan rapidly, to invest, etc. That it was not as easy to do with banks. So these companies, because they know their users, because their users trust them, it was easy for them to develop it. And also because the, let's say, regulatory environment was favorable for it. They were able to do it. But later on, the government and the regulator were really, let's say, aware of the risks of letting these 2 or 3 or 4 giants manage the market by themselves. Because in case there is, let's say, a bankruptcy of one of them, it can affect the whole Chinese economy. So on the long term, it's of course beneficial. It will definitely affect the stock price. It will affect the organizational changes within the companies. But on the long term, it always has a positive impact, especially if these companies plan to go global. So they can be aligned with the global regulations. And think like GDPR. GDPR in Europe is trying to regulate the data protection, forcing the banks to open their data to third party, etc., etc. But with the PSD2, sorry. So these are regulations for Europe. But for China, it's the same thing happening now. It's just that we were not used to see these kind of regulations, and we were surprised of it. But on the long term, it's always positive. And I'm really curious to see what new giant or new fintech will appear in the coming days. And still, like, let's watch it carefully then.
I fully agree with your approach. I think that, I mean, regulating that much areas that were not so much regulated is, of course, well, it might be scary at the very beginning, of course, because it involves like many new adjustments that require to be made. But at the same time, I think that in the long run, it's beneficial. We saw China, for example, now passing its data protection law, which is much more in line with GDPR than many other countries, for example, no, just as a comparison, because you mentioned now GDPR. So of course I can understand that at the very beginning it was a bit maybe like scary, surprising for the actors, no, in the Chinese TechFin industry, but at the same time, I think that eventually it's going to prove beneficial for everyone.
Of course, and we should always see regulations as giving the pace. So it gives the pace for new innovations. If we didn't have GDPR in Europe, we will not have, let's say, ethics. We will not have new actors. We will not have RegTech. We will not have many things. So there is always an opportunity in every crisis. So this is the way I see it, and I think this is maybe one of the biggest regulations they do. They will still apply new ones. They applied also for the cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, etc. But we'll talk about it later. But there is definitely benefits from it. And these companies, I mentioned about Alibaba and Tencent, but working for this company, especially Alibaba, they know how to adapt to changes. It's a core value of the company. One of the core values is embrace changes. So myself, I've changed many times the teams when I was at Alibaba, but this is, let's say, a normal process, which means that now they have new regulation, they will adapt. It will be tough at the beginning, but later on, it will prove that they're agile. And agility is one of the core, let's say, needs and the core, let's say, pre-requirements of any company nowadays, especially those working on technology and more specifically on fintech.
I fully agree. I fully concur. You mentioned now cryptocurrencies. We're going to get back to this later because that's actually a very hot topic. So we're going to cover this in more detail later. But before going to cryptos, I wanted to ask you as well about a topic that you mentioned in your courses, which is that of super apps. You mentioned that that regular apps in China are turning into super apps. So why and why is China leading this domain? Or maybe we should start from the very beginning. What are super apps?
Sure. So a super app is as simple as an app on a mobile phone that includes many services, many features that are within a certain ecosystem, an external ecosystem, which means that we can find some services that belong to the company, but also services that belong to other companies, partners. And with this single app, you can do many things. It can be financial services, it can be lifestyle services. And this is basically the simple definition of what is a super app. Why it has developed in China, especially because there are many reasons. The first reason is that there was a kind of trust between those who launched the super apps and the users. So the first ones who did it was Alibaba with Alipay. So first they developed an app that included only financial services, but then they had to connect those services and this app with the ecosystem of Alibaba. So e-commerce, logistics, movie streamings, food delivery, etc. And then it's connected to partners. So this is basically how it's started with Alipay. Then we had WeChat. 2011, WeChat launched its messaging platform. So they connected their ecosystem, which means gaming, because Tencent is first gaming company, tech gaming company, and then they connected financial services with WeChat Pay, and they connected all the partner services with let's say Meituan, Dianping. They connected with let's say transportation companies, and they connected with mini programs which are external from their apps. But later on, we saw a huge rise of super apps in China. So Alipay and WeChat are not the only super apps in China. I think there are over 50 super apps in China. Every e-commerce platform is offering a super app because it's a door for more revenue, and it's a door to collect data and offer more services for the users. And this is what they need. But there is another reason why it's really developing rapidly in China is because it's culturally speaking, Chinese people love to try new things. They love to try new services. When they have a new feature on the app, they will try it and see if they like it or not. That's why these companies are tech companies, but they're also data companies, because they deal with data from the intern to the CEO. Everyone works on data because they deal with over 1 billion people, even more than 1 billion users, and they have to make sure that they offer the right service for them. So it was really a natural evolution from a service to a super app. It was not like from the day to another one, let's launch super apps. Like what I can hear from other companies here around the world. Some say, oh, it's a good idea, it's working in China, so let's do it here. It's not systematic. Mm-hmm. And there is another reason also, because as I mentioned, there was need from people to use some certain services. And as there was this trust, I trust this company, and this company can offer me a service that I need, then I will use it. So it's just a trust relationship. Think like your bank, you trust your bank is offering you, let's say, a service of food delivery. You will trust it because you trust your bank, naturally. So this is the way how it's developed. And now we see that it's developing globally. Southeast Asia is developing their super apps. In India, with Paytm, like Gojek in Indonesia, Grab in Singapore. We also see in Europe with Lydia. PayPal is becoming a super app. AirAsia is becoming a super app. So it's just about offering a door for many services within one single app.
Yes, I remember the first time I got in contact with one of those super apps I think it was in 2013 when I first downloaded WeChat to speak with my friends from mainland China. It was quite surprising for me because I was used to our Western apps like WhatsApp, for example. No, so compared to that, it was very shocking for me because you could see that you could of course send messages to your friends, but at the same time they added so many different features that it made it so different from WhatsApp or any other app from the West. No, so that's why when people said some people said WeChat is like a Chinese WhatsApp, I said no, I mean they're wrong, because it's much more than that, because it merges so many different features and characteristics that it makes it much more complex, much more comprehensive, at least back then.
Exactly. So I had the same scenario as you, Oriol, where people telling me, "Oh, what do you use in China to communicate?" I say WeChat. Oh, I say like WhatsApp. I say yeah, but WeChat I can pay with it. Exactly. I can call a cab with it. I can order food with it. I can take a train ticket with it. So the approach is different, but it doesn't mean that because WeChat is that way, that WhatsApp, if they offer the same services, will work automatically. It's just because it will,
of course,
naturally adapted to China, to the Chinese citizens, and we cannot export the app as it is to other countries. They tried it in South Africa, for instance, but it doesn't work that way. So it's really to think of what the users want and how to fill this gap of needs, offering some services that they really need. And once they launch it, if it works, fine, let's keep it. If it doesn't work, switch to something else.
I fully agree. Each market is very different, so we cannot assume that whatever works in China will work in, let's say, Europe or Africa or America.
Exactly.
And now, moving forward, we finally made it to the part where we're going to discuss cryptocurrencies. We talked before a bit about China trying to come up with newer regulations on the TechFin area, etc. No, but there is one very hot topic especially from this year, from May and then August, which is that of cryptocurrencies. And I wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit about China's current approach to cryptos, and why do you think that the regulators in China adopted those decisions?
Sure. So the current situation, as you know, Oriol, and I think as all listeners know, are officially forbidden in China. So any Chinese citizen, and in China, it's forbidden to use and trade cryptocurrencies. So there was a regulation recently that officialized it, but it started from 2017 to regulate that step by step. And it also worked with the mining of Bitcoin. So there were several reasons why they blocked it. One reason is environmental, so to make sure that there is no electricity that is consumed to produce and to mine the Bitcoin and the cryptos in China, as we know that most of the miners were in China. The second reason is sovereignty, because China is about to launch its own Digital Yuan, so to make sure that there is no direct competitor that is uncontrollable, because Bitcoin and all these cryptos cannot be controlled in a way. And the third reason is more about, let's say, the way we can use these cryptocurrencies, because Chinese people will invest a lot in it. And it's a kind of money laundering method. So they want to avoid that, and they want to avoid some financial crisis related to that. And then it doesn't mean because China stops it, then other countries will not handle it. We could see the drop of Bitcoin price when they announced the regulation, but later on it increased again. So it doesn't have a direct impact on the long-term price of a Bitcoin. But China is investing on, let's say, core technologies around these cryptos, like blockchain. They are also into NFTs, etc. So they are still looking at it closely. And again, they want to guarantee the harmony. They want to guarantee the stability, as it was always the core, let's say, value and the core way of doing from China.
Yes, actually, one of the most surprising, or maybe I should say unique things from China is what you just mentioned, no? That despite this tough stance towards cryptos, they don't have this stance towards blockchain. I mean, they are promoting blockchain very heavily, to the point that President Xi, for example, back in 2019, was one of the first world leaders in publicly back blockchain as a technology, encouraging Chinese companies to seize the opportunities offered by blockchain. And we see China being currently involved in many blockchain-related projects. The other day, for example, I was talking with Yifan He, the CEO of Red Day Technology, here in my podcast, who's the firm behind the China's blockchain-based service network, which is a very interesting project which completely relies on blockchain. And the same idea applies, for example, to NFTs. So China is very active on the blockchain area, except in the crypto space. So I think it's it's quite a unique approach, because you don't see so many countries like being so tough towards cryptos whilst being so friendly towards blockchain as a technology. So it's quite unique, this approach, and I think that's what makes it so interesting, to study and to try to learn what they are doing and why.
Definitely, and they believe that blockchain can definitely change many things, not only on the financial sector, but in all other sectors, real estate, etc. But there is also something important about cryptos, especially China, is that the Binance, for instance, the crypto exchange, is born in China and is the world's largest crypto exchange platform. And there were many new projects related to crypto that were launched in China. But with the regulations, they had to adapt, as I mentioned before, with the regulations regarding Ant Group, Tencent, etc. But still, they will adapt. And those who were working directly within the crypto sphere, they will work on the blockchain sphere, or they will switch to other domains, adapting to those changes. And it's totally like my daily life in China. When I was living there, I was living in a street where there were like several restaurants, and I leave for a week, business trip, I come back. Among the 5 restaurants, 2 became some shoes stores with the same owners, because they will adapt to those changes. And it's the same thing happening with those crypto things, although it's something viewed from outside like a pressure, etc. But we should see the positive side of it. And it's like just to guarantee stability, it's to guarantee, let's say, kind of control as well of the economy. And on the long term, to avoid any, let's say, crisis or some troubles internally.
Yes, actually, if I'm not mistaken, over 60% of Bitcoin miners from the whole world were actually located in China before this ban in May this year. No, I think it was
Exactly.
60-ish%. Most of them in Inner Mongolia, some of them in Sichuan. So yes, I mean, it was quite of a shock to the crypto industry, but at the same time not so big, because as you said before, the Bitcoin price dropped a bit in May, June, July, but not that much. No, so I guess maybe the crypto market was kind of expecting something like that, I guess. And when it comes to what you said about Chinese people, that's very true as well. No, Chinese people are very adaptable. No, I mean, it's as you know, I used to live in Hong Kong, so it was very common to see what you just said. No, like certain shops not changing hands, but readapting and changing what they offered. I mean, we may have seen the same owners, the same people working in there, but that could be like a dim sum place, which became then a different kind of restaurant, then a shoe shop, as you said. So this adaptability is something that we may not have in the West in the same way as China does.
Definitely, and because it's moving to a very rapid pace, and they accept the changes, they accept the mistakes, they accept the regulations, etc. While in the West, maybe it takes more time, but I think the West shouldn't be like China and will not be like China. And China is not perfect as well. There is something in the West that China can never do. So the idea is really to take the best of each and try to learn from it. That's why I always try to share knowledge about China, because it's really inspiring. And same when I was in China, I was sharing some knowledge from the East, from the West, that can be inspiring as well. So it's just about taking the best of both, and regulations and let's say taking control of everything shouldn't be only the face of the iceberg that we should see. There are other things behind that guarantee on the long term some positive things.
I fully agree. I mean, I think that we can and should learn from each other, you know, and especially now in these uncertain times. I think it's become much more important than ever, you know, to try to learn from the others. And well, now before wrapping this discussion up, I wanted to ask you about a very hot topic as well, which is the digital yuan. You mentioned before, when talking about cryptos, that China is about to launch its digital yuan, which is actually one of my main areas of research. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. You know, like, how do you think digital yuan will reshape or change the payment landscape in China? What advantages do you think it will bring to China? I mean, what's your thought on this whole topic?
Sure. So the first thing to know about the digital yuan is that it's the most advanced project in terms of central bank's digital currency. Okay. Over 100 million people in China have already used it, thanks to the several experimentations in several cities with different businesses, etc. It does not change much in terms of usage from the actual payment solutions, because in China you pay by QR code or NFC, and it's the same thing with this. It's just that the system behind and processes behind will be handled by the central banks. And People's Bank of China, which is China's central bank. And what will change as well is the acceptance of digital yuan, because so far a merchant can refuse to accept Alipay or WeChat, which are taking 90% of mobile payments in China, but they cannot refuse to take digital yuan because it has this, let's say, national legitimacy, and it's like paying with cash, basically. So as this said, we see several, let's say, scenarios of launch, etc. But I think now they are trying to launch it step by step. There is no like big announcement of launching it. They announced for the Olympic Games that there will be some hard wallets to use digital yuan, thanks to maybe let's say cards. Also, we are going back to cards for those who don't want to use the smartphone. So there will be different forms of usage of this digital yuan. And several platforms are already accepting it, like Jingdong. We see some salaries that are paid in digital yuan. So it's taking more and more space. And it has, let's say, a big role to play. The first role is to make sure that there is, let's say, no competition with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. So I mentioned it before, but it's really, really important. Second one is to be a bit more independent from the tech companies, because so far, I said that 90% of payment ecosystem is taken by Alipay. I mean, the mobile payment ecosystem is taken by Alipay and WeChat. So with this national currency and national model of currency, although Alipay, WeChat disappear, we still have some, let's say, digital model that belongs to the state and that still can be connected to other companies. And then it will avoid all kind of, let's say, money laundering and some financing of terrorism and all this kind of, let's say, bad things with the traceability, with the transparency. And there is an ultimate reason as well of developing this is going global, because we know that China is trading with many countries. There is the Silk Road Initiative. So it's trying to make sure that thanks to different partnerships with countries, there is a, let's say, this digital yuan that is used by other countries as well, at least for the trade. Not directly like competing with dollar, because there is no direct proof of it, but some scenarios say that it will directly compete with the dollar. As we know now, there is a, let's say, a Cold War between China and the US on the economic, but also on financial parts.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, I don't think it's going to compete like with the dollar like overnight, because I mean the greenback still accounts for a much higher percentage of transactions in international trade than the renminbi. But it's true that it may help to change the situation, like maybe slowly. But I mean, it's going to make a difference, I guess.
Of course, and you know it better because it's your topic of expertise. But we see some partnership, for example, with the Thai and the, I think, UAE and Hong Kong and China's like to create a common blockchain platform, or let's say open ledger to make sure that there is their national CBDC that are used within this ecosystem, and to make easy to make transfers globally, while today it takes like several days to process. And it will somehow change this way of transferring money internationally. And so far, one of the only things that didn't change for several years is finance, global finance. And some countries already launched it. We always mention about the Bahamas, but it's a very, very small country. I think it's one of the smallest countries in the world. But if the biggest country in the world in terms of population officially launch its own one, it will definitely affect other ones. That's why over, I think, 85% of central banks around the world are investigating, are experimenting, not only to face the Chinese yuan, but for the same reasons, to be independent, to avoid the rise of the Bitcoin price, so all the money goes there and not to the economy. And it's a kind of protectionism as well. So Europe also investigate on it. And I think the original launch, and I think you mentioned probably about it, but was the Libra project announced by Facebook in 2014. And this is really what created the let's say the discussion, because a private company that launches its own currency, a private company that has 2 billion people, 2 billion users, that's terrifying for economies. So how we make sure that there is no such big dinosaur that try to handle the finance around the world, we have to launch our own ones. So this is also why China is doing it. They have the right, let's say, technologies, they have the right, let's say, trust from their citizens to be accepted, to be used. It's just a matter of time, and I think next year we'll see even more experimentations about it.
Well, thank you very much, Yassine, for sharing this. We are running out of time now, so I think this should wrap up our very interesting discussion on TechFin in China, your personal journey, China's approach to cryptocurrencies, China's digital yuan. We discussed many interesting topics in around 40 minutes. I would like to thank you, Yassine, for coming to my show. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise, Auriel, thank you very much, and very happy to discuss with you on this very cool topic.
And well, thank you all, dear listeners, for listening to this new episode of Digital Tomorrow. And please stay tuned for the next episodes. Thank you and see you soon.